Y'all, test run is finally here. The new Liches and Legends Gauntlet is finally dropped, and I'm 1,000,000,000% sure that the big question on everyone's mind is, what does the gear from this Gauntlet look like? Is it worth the time to farm? So today I thought I'd do a deep dive into all of the new gear. The good news is I ran the Gauntlet yesterday, and what you get for running the Gauntlet is gear that drops and also access to the crafter at the end. And I have images from the crafter that shows what all of the gear looks like. Starting right off, I wanted to do something a little different and start with the cosmetics, because they're doing something crazy this time around. What you see on your screen is what a full set of gear from the new Liches and Legends Gauntlet looks like. And it's pretty obviously, if you've done the Gauntlet, it's based on the final boss, who looks really cool and has like a game dice that actually, like, you know, responds to some of his cheats. My favorite part of the stitch has to be the hat, has to be the dice. I think those two absolutely legendary. I love what they're doing with it. I think they tend to put out gauntlets, you know, with pretty good looking gear in general, but I don't know, this one just feels very well polished, especially the dice. I feel like it's unique. It makes you wonder, like, if you see it on the in the spiral, where it came from. I feel like it's a really good concept. Now, the actual gear, I think a lot of people were wondering, what is the gear gonna look like, because the level cap hasn't increased since the last gauntlet. And as a result of this, what they've basically done is they've dead-ass copy and pasted stats from last year's Gauntlet onto this year's Gauntlet. So if y'all don't know, the Forbidden Library Gauntlet dropped a template of gear that was very high resist, very high damage as well. And the big trade-off is that it does not give shad rating. Now, when I'm talking high damage and resist, this is actually better than Reaver gear, which is like the main storyline gear when it comes to, like, you know, like if you quest through Wallaroo, you get Reaver gear. This actually gives more damage and more resist in return for not giving shad rating. It's actually one of the best PvE robes in the game. And now, instead of farming the library gauntlet for this robe, you can basically get the exact same stats but with different item cards by doing the new gauntlet. And what I think is actually especially unique about this specific gauntlet is I would say that the item card that we're getting as a replacement in this template is actually better from the new Liches and Legends gauntlet. What you see on your screen is just the myth robe. This looks exactly like the plot armor robe that you get for myth from the library gauntlet, but instead of a dispel that you're probably not going to use that much, you're actually getting a very useful brace card. I'd say in PvP, having an extra brace card, if you were to run this robe and, you know, give up shads, it's a really big deal. I would definitely run this over the library robe. As far as the other gear from this gauntlet that actually, you know, gives up shad, while the item cards are still really cool, we're getting aura-based item cards right after an update that just added harmful auras for the first time. I think that is really cool. The issue really becomes, even in PvE, if you start running the robe and the hat and the boots, you just start giving up shad rating to the point where you actually just won't be able to use shadow spells. I think this is especially relevant because there's no such thing as a 2 shadow pip shadow enhanced spell anymore. Gear that gives a lot of shad rating is going to give you much quicker access to very high utility shad spells, which is kind of the new norm now with this update. So as far as the main gear goes, what I highly recommend is farming for the robe and not the hat and the boots if you're just trying to get one piece of gear that gives you a lot of damage and resist at the expense of shad. And in PvP, if you're willing to give up that shad, that extra brace card is actually maybe it makes it one of the best robes in the game, I would argue. Now, as far as the rest of the gear, this is where it gets a little funky. Let's say that you don't want to give up shads with your robe because you just, you know, you want to give up shads on something else. So one other maybe viable choice from this gauntlet is the wand. I managed to get a picture of it, and honestly, I probably didn't appreciate how cool it was at first. Yes, you don't get shads, but you do get a square socket instead of a relatively useless tier jewel, which I think is actually pretty cool. That gives you extra health on low HP setups. The item cards are also really good. If you're a shield-based school, this is actually one of the best defensive wands that I've ever seen. I would actually say this would be very worth going for, even at the expense of shads for maybe PvP or PvE. But my big red flag here is it doesn't give same school wand hits. I think that's the one thing holding it back. I feel like a wand hit, that's like a free 500 damage for 0 pips. You're building pips or breaking debuffs or doing 500 damage on any school. The second is off school, that kind of limits its ability to be used, especially, you know, in life or death scenarios where every damage matters. So I actually think it's an interesting template. I actually think it's better than the library wand as well, because the item cards are relatively useful. It gives astral shields and stuff that you can only get from the Polaris raid. This is giving you item cards that you can only get from raiding. Kind of a big deal. But I'm gonna be very honest. I don't think giving up more than one piece of shad rating on any piece of gear is worth it. And if I were to do it, I think the robe is a clear choice. I think the brace is universally usable, and the robe itself has just very good stats. Now, finally, while I'd argue that the Athame and Ring are not worth it because they literally give a pip chance in this template, it's really, really awful, I would say that the Amulet is actually one of the other pieces of library gear anyways that people actually like adopted as part of the meta. The more defensive your school, the less you need that extra circle jewel that other amulets give, and you want that square jewel from this new template. And this is really interesting, right? While it gives 2 item cards, one of the item cards is a 55% tower shield. For any school that gets the new Liches and Legends Gauntlet Amulet, you actually have access to a very, very powerful debuff that actually you can't make, there's no TC versions of this anymore. I'd say the only way to make a universal shield that good is to run another amulet from Rasputin and use Bolstered Ward, which is like crazy. So it's actually like, it's a cool concept that we have access to a powerful universal debuff. But the other item card is awful. It's basically like an infal, but worse because it doesn't give accuracy and it's one entire pip. This is like essentially a Pierce Aura. I don't really see anybody using this, but I guess if you were to run this amulet for the shield, this is like kind of an inbuilt bonus. Now, the library amulet, which gives the exact same stats, exact same template, does give a brace card. Now, I would argue that the new Liches and Legends robe is great because of the brace card. Using that same logic, the library amulet, I would say, is still probably better. So I wouldn't really farm this for the amulet at all. The deck is essentially a Reaver deck, but with a square jewel. Now, what I don't love about that is I feel like you just don't want to be giving up that many circle jewels. Those are your real source of offense, both in PvE and PvP, right? These circle jewels for some schools are worth like 11 damage. Another thing that I don't like about the Liches and Legends / library template in general is that the actual decks, they don't give pip conserve, which I would argue is really, really helpful as well. And the best circle decks in game also give a really, really useful Dark Surge item card, which is one of the best cards in PvP right now. So I think we got a pretty mixed bag. There's a few things that I would do to improve the template in general. I would say the amulet item cards are kind of lacking. I'm not saying that it needs to give auras and only auras, but I do think if the library gauntlet gave an aura dropping amulet, I don't see why this one doesn't also give like an actually good aura. I don't really understand why a Pierce Aura is even in the question. I like the tower shield. I hate the Pierce Aura. The wand could be interesting, could find its way into some setups. I think they need to, like, you know, get real and add same school wand hits. I don't know why we're level 170. We're getting templates that don't give storm wand hits on a storm. I think that's actually really, really silly. But overall, y'all, I would say the gauntlet is worth running purely for the experience. I think it's really fun. I didn't even get to do it with people because test run was bugged. But I think if you were to do it with people, I think it's a lot of fun. I think the cosmetics are really, really cool. It has a lot of replayability, which is, you know, if you haven't watched the actual VOD, highly recommend watching it. I had a lot of fun for the first playthrough. Would I come back again and again to farm this? Unless there's something really game-changing that drops, which we will see. I think there's stuff that we still don't really know about the gauntlet. Unless there is, I'm not going to go too much on this, unless, you know, I really just want to go out of my way to get the robe and maybe the amulet on every character. I feel like those are the big ones, even from the library gauntlet, so why not do it from this gauntlet as well? You know what, I would say the big takeaway is it is a fun gauntlet. There are some really cool cosmetics, so I feel like everyone's gonna want those at some point. And there is gear that is sometimes, I would argue, best in slot. So it is a dungeon that is worth giving attention to, just not for as many pieces of gear as maybe other gauntlets. Hopefully this video helped. I know a lot of people were curious about what was at that gear crafter at the end of the gauntlet, so I thought I'd make, you know, my take on what's worth farming. Let me know what you guys think of the cosmetics, the template that they are using with this gauntlet, the fact that they reused it, and what maybe they could do to make this template feel special. The good news is it is still test run, so maybe this template is subject to change. So, you know, feedback away in the comments. Drop a like if you enjoyed, y'all. Leave us up if you're new, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon, and yeah.